Okay, let's move on to number 7, roof geometry. This one's an interesting picture sent to me by one of my inspectors. I drove past this house many, many times. And, thankfully we don't have to measure them if we know for sure it is not hip roof. But this one would be a fun one to practice on. And I don't know that I'd want to do it. But anyway, so a couple things here. This really hasn't changed any on the new form, but we are going to look at the hip, the flat roof, and other. And I'll show you some examples, and we'll kind of get this settled. It's a math problem, but I also want you to remember, do not consider roofs or porches or carports that are attached only to the fascia or wall of the host structure, or over unenclosed space in the determination of the roof perimeter, or roof area for geometry classification. So let's move on. Here you go. Why do we look at this? So again, from the ARA study, this is a chart they put in their little study that they sent to the state, and you'll notice that a hip roof outperforms other roofs pretty well. Flat roof fails pretty early. This is why we generally consider it a penalty on the wind mitigation form, and a gable and on a form roof shape fails before a hip. So just so you understand where we're going with this and why we do this. So how do we measure it? I get this question all the time. Well, what is this? What is that? Well, the definition is of a hip would be a roof that slopes down to the wall that is greater than 212. So you can have a flat roof, and that's less than 212 or less. That's considered flat. So a hip slopes down to the wall, or hip side, hip section, and is greater than 212. So there you go. Now, the blue lines here represent the hip sections. The red line represents how we measure the non-hip section. The yellow line measures is not included in the measurement because it's a open porch and it's connected to the wall and it's not part of the interior of the house. The green line tells you that you have to continue the perimeter. So, you're going to have to use that as part of your perimeter. And now, obviously, I don't have the whole perimeter here, but you get the point. So you don't want to forget these measurements. Here again is another classic example. We have a hip over the garage and a gable over the front entryway. So in this picture, I would measure that gable, and then I would use that and then measure the whole perimeter. And remember that gable is set back a foot or two, so you'll see some examples where the gable is not necessarily part of the perimeter. So here we are again. People ask how to measure these, and so we have these roofs that slope down, and we call those hip sides. Then we have non-hip sides. Make sure that we understand that we're measuring not along the rake, but along the horizontal. It's if we had flattened the house out and whatever was touching the ground or the outline it left would be where we would measure. So again, a couple other examples, and then you can see we're measuring straight across. This is a little easier to tell, but that's how we do that. Don't forget little sections of the roof where the red arrow is pointing down. Those count as well. Sometimes there's a few of those, and a few feet can make a difference. My neighbor says, we have a hip roof, and then you look at the aerial, you look and say, yeah, your neighbor does, but the guy on the left probably doesn't, and the guy on the right may not either. So, looking at aerials before you do the inspection makes it helpful. Certainly can make your job a little easier. Know what you have to measure and what you don't. So, I also talk about these spots where we have these raised sections. This is a gable on a raised section of roof, and I will tell you that we're going to measure that as well. Again, we're not measuring along the rake, but we're measuring it along the horizontal. You can do that from the end, obviously. Don't forget your little sections. Given the fact that there's a gable on the right side of this house and that in the middle, we know it's non-hip, but I just try to use this as an example on telling you how to measure it. So this little lady lived in Cocoa, and her flat roof over her carport did not count. It is attached to the wall, so it's attached below the fascia, and it's not part of the house, so it doesn't count. So we can ignore that when we do our measurements. This one here, this flat roof on this, or low slope roof on this rear patio, does count because it's tied together. Part of the structure. This one here is kind of what the definition meant. We have this open patio in the back of the house and a flat roof, and it doesn't count. It's attached to the wall. This one here, again, we're taking a picture. We know this, we have a gable on the left here, but we have this flat roof in the back. This flat roof does count because it's part of the structure. They actually made this part of the house, and now it does count because it is living space. So that being said, we move on to this one here. This is Orlando, and we did this for a friend, and they wanted to buy in the house, but it was interesting because you stand here, you go, okay, that's a nice patio you have. You look at it, you go, oh, it's a light metal construction. It's not attached. It's attached to the wall. It's not attached to the structure. Very good. But when you look inside, they opened it up to the house. It's now part of the structure. Despite being a light metal structure, we removed the slider and they removed the window. It's not part of the house, and this whole section counts. So bear that in mind. That's what we're talking about. If you can isolate it, you can not include it. And I mean isolate it by having windows and doors that isolate it and not tied together with the AC systems. We consider ductwork that runs from a main part of the house to a patio that's been enclosed, now included in part of the house, even if the windows or doors are still present. And the reason for that is mold. It can't be isolated from the house because the AC system, and now you can have other issues. So we want it where it can be isolated. So here we have our yellow lines are the measurement for our non-hip, but also the red line because it's a low slope roof. So, even though part of that yellow line is not part of the perimeter, it does count fully as the non-hip section. This one here, I used a picture earlier. We have this, it looks like a hip across the front, but it's not. That is a low slope roof, even though it has shingles on it. We measured it, and you can see it was less than 212, so it's definitely considered a flat roof. So, other in this case, because when you're talking multi-family here, multi-unit. So, that's how that works out. Now, the green line here is our perimeter, but our red line is our non-hip. The yellow line is a valley or a transition. We don't count that, but I was getting questions about it, so I drew that in for everybody. It's not met in the measurements. Same thing with these pictures here. So we have the green line is the perimeter. On the bottom picture, the red line is the non-hip section. This is a very old picture, and what happened was we did this inspection. The inspector didn't look at an aerial, and he missed that flat section. So you'd have to measure the perimeter of that flat roof as other, and the valleys we don't count those. This is how we measure these raised roof sections. So even though this building looked like a hip roof, we had these all through the middle. It was a multifamily, and it wound up being non-hip because of that. So here again is that example. We did some math on the measurements. It's been a while since I looked at that, but this is what we do. This is probably not the exact picture. It looks like it's off, but anyway, that's how we measure them. And again, we're going to measure the outside of that flat roof, not the transition from the shingles to the modified. This picture was sent to me and they asked, what do I do with this? Again, this is a valley. We're not measuring it except for the top right section there. The top right section where the little, about 1 foot is exposed. It's not even 1 foot. I would call this a terrible roof design, but what do I know? Here's the end all be all. This is how everybody basically agreed a roof should be measured. And we're measuring again the perimeter, and we're not measuring the second story perimeter as not part of the perimeter, because if we flatten the roof, it wouldn't be part of the perimeter. So the outside, we get questions about that a lot. Is there two perimeters? No, there isn't. There's one perimeter. And I say that a lot. So it's just the outside of the roof. It's just the way we decided to do the math to make it simple. This was decided many, many, many years ago in how to figure this out. And as complicated as it sounds, it was a lot easier than what we did in the past, which was what we called any major wall length. So one thing I'd like to point out, because it does come up, is this dormer here. If this dormer here is closed off from the attic, meaning it's a false dormer. I mean, there's plywood underneath it. There's no attic opening. We don't count that other there as part of the roof. If you have things like a cupola or something like that, it's just not part of the attic. It's just decorative. We do not count that as other. But if it was open to the attic or open to the house, it would be certainly counted. So just a little distinction there, because we, as we do these things come up and people ask, how do we determine what we should, and people say it shouldn't count, well, you're right, it shouldn't, and it doesn't. So, all right. We're going to take a little break, and we'll come back with the sealed roof deck system, or SWR.